Hello and welcome to the Westcity Church podcast. If you'd like to get to know us more, find us at westcitychurch.com.au. We really hope that you're encouraged by today's message.
Hello. I'm supposed to take a moment to introduce myself, so I'm Robyn. Jesus lived in a culture that was very controlled. It was very controlled by rules and boundaries. You know, we think it's dreadful, but our culture is also controlled, very controlled culture, and we may not be aware of it, but nevertheless, it is a case. Jesus was not like that. Jesus broke the rules when they were a barrier to God. I think the most common one that we're all aware of is when he healed on the Sabbath. But he did so much more than that. Everything Jesus did showed us grace, love, and pointed us to God. Our human nature is to want to control. Our human nature says, if you want it, pray this way. If you do it this way. If we like to control, but not Jesus. So when Jesus took the bread and took the wine, he took what was right in front of him at the time, what was most easily accessible. He didn't take the fancy stuff. He didn't take, in that culture at that time, every table would have had bread and wine on it. So if Jesus was maybe in Tibet, maybe he would have taken some very hard, dry naan bread and yak's milk tea, because that's what's available up there. Up there wasn't wine, and the bread was very different. Maybe in Southeast Asia, it would be rice and green tea, no milk. Maybe here in our church it would be coffee and bickies, I don't know. But the point is that it was easily available and easily accessible, and that's what we need to remember. Now, the point of communion is to make space to remember him. It is not the ritual or the tradition itself that is important. It is the meaning behind it, which is accessible to everyone, no prerequisites, no conditions, just like Jesus, accessible to everybody.
Well, here we are. Who's been part of a Homebrew series before? Hands up. So my first Homebrew series here at Westcity was last January. And I did love it. It was so great to have different people come up and share their story. So my challenge when it comes to myself having the mic here at Homebrew is I don't feel that interesting. And I don't think I have that much to say. Except when you start doing the work, you realise, oh, I've actually got a few things to say. But coming and sharing my stories here at Homebrew actually gets to the core of some of my own insecurities. One of my biggest insecurities is that I always don't feel like I'm enough. No matter what the setting, no matter what the situation, there's this nagging insecurity that you're not enough and it's not going to be good enough. So when you're applying that to stories of your own life, that's awfully daunting. So please know that as I'm here today and sharing these stories, that at some level I feel a bit like I'm doing a nudie run, that I'm sitting up here completely vulnerable, sharing my stories while deep down I'm fighting the lie in my head that says, it's not good enough. You're not enough, and no one really wants to hear what you've got to say. Thank you. And that's why I'm here, because we all have those, right? We all have those things in the corner that just stay there and annoy us and irritate us. But there's often moments like this in life where you get to actually decide that they won't have the final say in who you are. So that's me this morning, coming and sharing with you. Now, if there's anything you do need to know about me, it's that I love words. I don't know why, but I've always just loved words. One of my favourite memories as a child was being on holidays somewhere. I don't recall where. I think it might have been Kalbarri. And we ended up in a secondhand bookstore, and my mum had said, I could choose a book. And so I remember scouring this bookstore to find a book, and I ended up with a book on Shirley Temple, of all things. I don't know why. It was a biography of her, and I remember just reading it and just loving books as a child, loving the ability to sit and read, finding a sunny corner and just immersing myself in story and words. But then I also love music as well, because I find the lyrics in songs really meaningful and really impacting. Sometimes it can really get in the way because some really great sounding songs have really terrible lyrics. And so it's hard for me to not hear them every time they come on the radio. So I love words. So I thought, how am I going to share with you some stories of my life? And recently throughout the year, I've watched on, mind you, does anybody still watch free-to-air TV? Perhaps not, a few of us. So on ABC, which is really showing my age even more, there's a series called Take 5 with Zan Rowe. And now Zan Rowe is a music journalist, which Double J, and she's got this show where she does Take 5 is the title, and she has these iconic famous people come on and they share their top 5 songs with them. So what I thought is, rather than sharing my top 5 songs with you, I'd share my top 5 books. And so I'd share books that have shaped me and moulded me along the way. And now please don't get lost if you aren't a reader. I realise there'd be lots of people sitting here who don't love to read and don't love books. So don't get stuck on the formula. I'm not saying you need to read books in order to find God. But I hope what you can hear is a hunger for God, a searching for his light that has allowed him to speak to me in multiple ways. So I hope that's what you take away with you. The reminder for that came from a quote that I read this week, because I do love quotes. Because I love words. And it's from a gentleman called Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. No idea who he is. I'm trusting the person that had it in their book. And he said, if you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men to gather wood, divide the work and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. And that was the picture I put in my head as I prepared for this morning. So please know that I'm not trying to offer you a prescription or a formula that you should follow, but more I hope that what you hear is a yearning and a desire for God that I hope could translate into your own life as well. So the first book I want to show you, I've got some kind of images on the screen to just help you along the way, is a Good News Bible. Now that might seem fairly obvious, but this particular Good News Bible, and this is actually a photo of a particular Good News Bible, I got given to me in 1990. So in 1990, I was 12. I was in year 7 at school, and I didn't grow up in a church family or background at all. So I had no exposure. Well, my only exposure to church at that point probably would be through my nana. My nana was a devout Catholic, and she would often do mass on a Sunday. So if we slept over as grandkids, we would sleep over at my nana's house from time to time. She would love, obviously, as a nana, to take us along to mass. Now, we hated going along to mass. We didn't understand it. I never got the right things, and the kneeling on the pews was really hard on my knees, and I just remember not wanting to go there. So we'd often just pretend to be asleep if we slept over at Nana's house. We'd pretend to be asleep, and then she was kind enough that she couldn't bring herself to wake us. So every now and then we might do mass with Nana, but that was about it. I could see my sister smiling at me. Did you ever sleep in too, pretend? Yeah, we did. And I remember my mum had a Catholic Bible in it was in the top of a spare room cupboard, and it was a zipped Bible. I can still picture it, and I don't know what I thought of it, but I knew it was there. So that was the basis of my kind of church background. But in primary school, back in my day, we still had religion in life at school. I went to a public primary school in Greenwood. It's no longer there. But we had religion in life classes every week. So we had a local volunteer from one of the local churches would come, and they would share scripture classes with us. I don't really remember anything much of the classes, but I do also remember that at every assembly we would recite the Lord's Prayer, and it was Old King James Version, and that's still the Lord's Prayer version I have in my head. We would say at every assembly we would say the Lord's Prayer. And so Religion in Life that year were running a camp in year 7, and there was no year 7 camp. I don't know why, but I remember we were quite outraged by this. So a few of us decided we'd do the Religion in Life camp instead. like that was somehow the same thing. We just wanted camp. So myself and a few of my friends went along to Religion in Life camp, and it was at this particular camp that was at Camp Carrum, run by local church volunteers, that I got given this Good News Bible. And if you go to the next slide, Kerry, you can see that there's the inscription. It was presented to Lauren Mitchinson, that's my maiden name, by Mrs. White, who was my teacher at Religion in Life camp in October 1990. And now why this Bible is important is not just because of that camp. That camp, I don't really remember much of the camp, to be honest with you. I don't really remember much of the Religion in Life classes, but I kept this Bible. And forward to 1993, so a few years later, and I find myself reading this Bible. Now, at that point in my life, I'm a 13, 14-year-old teenager, and our journey as a family was quite disjointed and quite broken. There's much fodder if you wanted to look as to why I don't feel enough. You can search my childhood quite a lot and you'll find a few things to look there. So, you laugh, but it is true. So, my parents had split up when I was 6. I'd lived with my mum for a lot of that time, but by this time at 13, I'm living with my dad and my sisters as well. But I felt very alone. I felt very sad a lot of the time. And my memory of that stage of my life, honestly, was spending a lot of time in bed. I'm naturally quiet and timid. I'm not outgoing and, kind of going to hang out with lots of people. So I think that was my way of just kind of bunkering down and going like, you know what, I'm just not quite sure what to make of a whole pile of things, so I'm actually just going to shut down. So I would go to school, but I would come home and then I just have memories of being in my room, and often just kind of my bed was my safe place. And I actually felt quite attached to my doona, funnily enough, my childhood doona. Isn't it strange the things you attach to? I still have the doona. But I remember one night, I'm not sure, but I opened up my Good News Bible and I began to read it. And I did that from time to time. And it was, just read words. But on this particular occasion, it was in an April time, in my Good News Bible, and you can see on the photo there's images in a Good News Bible, there's illustrations. And this particular time when I was reading my Bible, I don't quite know how else to explain it, and it's really not something I can really understand, other than to say that Jesus came alive to me from the page. And so I'm reading this Bible, and all of a sudden, this picture just felt really real. And I just felt the presence of Jesus, and I just knew that Jesus was who he was and that he was right there with me. And it was probably the first moment in my life that I felt seen, and I felt I felt seen, and Jesus was just real to me in that moment. So I'm not church. I don't know that you're meant to say a sinner's prayer and you're meant to do all sorts of formulaic things. So the best I can describe it is I just recall saying a yes to Jesus. And I don't know what I said yes to, but I just remember in the moment feeling this real presence of Jesus and saying, that's what I want. And so I actually got in touch with my Religion in Life teacher after that point and tried to, she got me along to a local church. And from there I started to attend church, and that was my journey of faith and how that began. So that's when I was 14. And a few years forward, maybe it was kind of 10 years ago now, part of a course that I was doing got us to kind of write a 1-minute testimony, if you like. And just this idea of like, can you drum down in 1 minute what your testimony or your experience of God was? And it was actually really, really hard to do. But I did do it, and I thought I'd share that with you because it really does sum up my experience of this Good News Bible and how it shaped me. And it just says, when I was 14, I felt sad, I felt lost, and I felt alone. Then one night I found Jesus while I was reading the Bible, and faith came alive to me. Since then, I found strength and belonging in Jesus. And at some level, it's kind of that simple for me. It's kind of never gotten more complicated than that. And so that was me as a 14-year-old. Now, there's lots, obviously, that happens as you come forward for that. But if we go to the next book in my slides, we come to a couple of Richard Foster books. One is Celebration of Discipline, and the other is Life with God. And now both these books came into my world a lot later. We're probably talking around 2014. And I tried to work out as I was reviewing this, why don't I have anything that I could actually add before then? Because at 14, I was in year 10. I finished school. I went to Bible college for 4 years because I just knew that I loved God and I didn't know what else I wanted to do, so I would just go to Bible college. And so I just wanted to be a pastor. I just thought I just wanted to serve God however I could. And so that was the trajectory. So I've been immersed in church world for quite a long time since then. But fascinatingly enough, I couldn't really think of any books that have really kind of stood out for me at that point. And there's a couple of reasons for that. And by the time we moved forward 20 odd years, while I was young at church, I met Gavin and we had children quite early, quite young. So my 20s were full of kind of babies and toddlers and family life. And so it's no surprise that in that kind of a situation, there's a lot that's just happening. And God constantly spoke to me, but not so much through the time of sitting and reading. But I also look and I recognise that while I was sitting at church through that season, I think I thought I had to get it right. And the job was to become a good Christian and to do the right things. So I actually think I was spending more of that time looking perhaps to the person that was sitting here preaching or somewhere else, trying to get a picture of who I was meant to emulate. And so if I'm going to be in ministry, I need to look like X, Y, or Z. I need to be a certain thing. I need to be a certain person. And so I think that's part of why I don't have a book or something, because I don't think I'd learnt yet that actually I was to make it my own. And so that's what started to happen when I read these books from Richard Foster. Now, Celebration of Discipline sounds awfully scary, that title. But really, the thing I love about Richard Foster is he creates this space. He calls you to this point where actually my job as a follower of Christ is to create an environment, is to create a posture within my own soul that God would be able to speak to. Not that I get it right so God can speak to me. And so that was actually incredibly freeing to recognise there's actually some habits, there's some, disciplines, if you like, that can aid this formation, this longing to become like Jesus, that it's not this passive thing that I sit and wait for someone else to actually give to me, but actually it's something that I can be a part of. And I remember probably one of the most memorable messages I've ever heard was back in 2004. And at the time, we were actually in Sydney, and we went along to a Hillsong service, and a gentleman called Robert Ferguson was speaking. And he spoke this message, and I just knew it was profound, and I parked it, and I revisited it over and over. And the premise of this message really was that our role as followers of Christ was actually to go about the job of rolling your own cigarette. And what he meant by that was you have to be involved in the process. Roll your own was what he kept saying. That actually this is what being a follower of Christ is that you choose the tobacco, you choose the paper, and that you would be engaged in this process, that it's not some consumeristic, kind of passive thing. And I mean, it's hilarious to think about, but that I remember sitting there and it really just, something shifted in me as I was listening to him speak. And I've gone back to it over and over. And I think that's why these books then also became kind of like a bit of resonance, I suppose, that I was getting this sense of like, what is it actually going to look like for me to roll my own? What is my formation going to look like? Who is it that God's wanting me to be? Around this time, I also found a saying on the back of a cafe wall in Northbridge. And it just said, the simple things done well. And again, that really struck me. And I just felt the Holy Spirit at that moment speaking to me and just reminding me the simple things done well. Don't overcomplicate it, Lauren. Don't overthink it. The simple things done well. And really for me that meant loving well. It meant being in God's presence and just to not get more bogged down and busy than I needed to be. So those two books shaped me, and I have gone back to them multiple times. That's how you know a book shapes you, right? That you read it more than once. So they certainly shaped me and just reminded me, or taught me, I should say, that actually my job in this journey with God and this walk is to make sure I'm creating the environment, the atmosphere within my own space that God can actually minister to. And then the next books that kind of built on this were two books. One is Evangelism for the Rest of Us, and the other one is Quiet by Susan Cain. And what these books taught me, don't be scared off by the evangelism for the rest of us. It's actually, funnily, not much about speaking and evangelising in the way we think it is. But really what it taught me, and it's a book about what does evangelism look like for introverts. Because I was becoming more and more aware, and at this point I was in paid church roles and other ministry spaces. So I was up the front and I was doing lots of things, trying to be the right kind of person, right? I need to be charismatic. I need to be outgoing. I need to be all these things. And inside, I'm not that naturally. I'm actually not that funny. And I think when you look... But when I got this idea that to be up on stage and speak, preach, you need to be funny. You need to crack jokes. And really everyone has to be in the palm of your hands. And I'm like, I couldn't care less about that. So reading both these books just taught me to be myself. It was so refreshing as I read Susan Cain's book Quiet to go like, I'm so introverted. I'm totally energized by myself. I love nothing more than just being on my own and to realise as I read the evangelism for the rest of us that that's actually a starting point, that I needn't be something different. And the premise of the book is that actually our job is to find where God is at work and join him there. Nothing more, nothing less. Geez, that was profound for me. As I read that, I just felt myself come home. Because I'm like, I can do that. I love doing that. That's actually what I want to do with my life. I want to find where God is at work and I want to join him there. So the freedom I found as I read both those books was so wonderful. It was scary as well because you then start to be aware that you might not fit in the ways that you wanted to fit. But it's also incredibly freeing as you realise maybe that's not the point. So both those books and that idea of just finding where God is at work and joining him there, to me, encapsulate the idea of the simple things done well. How about we just get about that, right? How about I just get busy trying to attune myself to find where God is at work, to have my eyes, my ears, my heart so attuned to the voice of God and the sight of God that I could see him at work, and then I'd have the courage to join him there. That sounds kind of fun to me. All right, so let's move on to the next book. The next book for me was The Hobbit. Now, I have to be honest and say, I did watch the movie first. Now, normally, if I've watched a movie, I can't read the book. It just spoils it. So if there's ever a movie adaptation coming out and the book, I have to read the book first and then watch the movie because otherwise it's just not the same. But I remember watching The Hobbit and I loved it so much that I then went and devoured the book. And I missed it when it came out in the cinemas because, I have 4 children and I had a really busy season during that time of just family life. But I remember watching Bilbo Baggins in his wonderful space of Hobbitville. He's all just happy, content, loves his life. He's got a full larder with all his preserves and, his goals, right? Who doesn't want a larder full of preserves? And he's really content with his life. And then along come these visitors that disrupt his world and just, he gets invited on this bigger journey. And that really spoke to me at the time because I was really starting to feel quite restless in myself, starting to feel quite restless in the church ministry work that I was engaged in and really feeling like it's pretty safe and comfortable. But yet I watched The Hobbit and then I read the book and devoured the words and felt this real call for adventure. And I felt that sense of I loved watching Bilbo Baggins change throughout those movies into who he became. And I think it spoke to me of the real danger when you are an introvert and you love quiet time and you love alone time of actually kind of camping there and forgetting that there's a big wide world out there full of adventure, full of experiences, full of learning that can shape you and mould you and become more. And during that time, I had a T-shirt that I had bought because I liked the design on it. And then I realised in the fine print down the bottom on the front, it had this saying and it said, not all who wander are lost. And I just thought that was brilliant. I'm like, yes. So being kind of not wandering and not knowing where to land and not knowing where you're going and being up for something new doesn't mean I'm lost. Could just mean I'm up for something. So I really grabbed hold of that little saying on this T-shirt. And then as you move on and you get to Fellowship of the Rings with J.R. Tolkien, this is one of the quotes I want to read to you. And it's very similar, Steve, to what you had shared. And it says, "The road goes ever on and on, down from the door where it began. Now far ahead the road has gone, and I must follow, if I can, pursuing with eager feet, until it joins some larger way where many paths and errands meet. And where to then? I cannot say. And when I read that, that just gave me a real sense of hope that actually the road goes on, the invitation is real, and I don't have to know where it's going to take me. And trusting, though, that at some point down the road, wherever that may be, it's going to join up with other paths. It's going to make sense. There's going to be a direction that I can see. And that for me was a really powerful, it sparked my imagination. It sparked a sense of like, ooh, I wonder what more there could be. And as disruptive and unsettling as that is, that was a really a great turning point for me. It really shaped me. But then we go to the next book. And this book is called Anonymous, Jesus, Hidden Years and Yours by Alicia Britt-Chaulet. And I've read this book multiple times. And let me just read you the publisher's synopsis because I think it really sums up what this book is about. It says, we all experience times of hiddenness when our potential is unseen and our abilities unapplauded. This book redeems those times by reminding us that though we often want to rush through these anonymous seasons of the soul, they hold enormous power to cultivate character traits that cannot be developed in any other way. And at that particular stage of my life, I felt quite unseen. And please hear me. In the background here, I have a wonderful husband, great children, like great life. So my world's not falling apart in a physical sense. But again, those deep things that just nag at you, that just kind of bother you. And for one of those, obviously I've shared already that sense of not being enough. The other one is just often feeling hidden and unseen. And so at that particular stage of my life, I felt very hidden and very unseen. I was struggling to work out what it might look like. I'd always just wanted to be a pastor. That's all I had kind of committed myself to as a vocation, if you like, alongside mothering. And yet just felt like I was doing a really poor job. I wasn't hitting the kind of the success I wasn't where I thought I would be. If you told me 10 years ago, I would have painted you this picture and here I was and it didn't feel like I thought it would feel. I didn't feel as content as I thought I would feel. And so this book, Anonymous, was just such a fantastic book for me to read as the author unpacks the idea that we all have winter seasons. And she uses a picture of a deciduous tree to help paint that picture. And recognising that when we look at a winter tree with all its leaves gone, we don't see a tree that's done, never to be used again, but we see a tree that's in winter. And we know that that tree will have leaves again and will flower again. And she takes you through a beautiful journey of recognising that when Jesus hit the temptations in the wilderness, the reason he was able to actually do so well during that period was because of those hidden years, the years that had led him to that point. He didn't just kick in gear at that moment, but that God and the Holy Spirit had been actually training him and equipping him. So it's a beautiful book of just recognising the things in your life that God is doing that no one else can see, that are unseen. And so I read that, I think, for the first time about 2015. And then again in 2018 when we had quite a change happen in our world church-wise, and I stepped down from a ministry pastoral role that I was in at the time because I just felt that God had something different for us. So there's a lot of grief that was attached to that because at that particular point in time, I thought to myself, this might be as good as it got for me. Like I thought that's what I was meant to be. I thought that's what I was meant to do. So to have to walk away from that, you start to question yourself and you start to question God. And what happens though in a really beautiful way is that you can let go of church and you can regain where God sits for you. And when you can differentiate those two things, it's actually a wonderful, wonderful gift. Because then when you come to church, you bring that as a gift. No longer are the two so kind of enmeshed and codependent that it creates this unhealthy kind of toxic space. There's actually this beautiful synergy where you know where you start and finish, you know where church starts and finishes, and then somehow together you can actually do a beautiful dance. So that book was a great gift to me through a really tough time. And then we moved to the next one. And I'll go quickly through these last couple. Faith After Doubt by Brian McLaren. Why your beliefs stopped working and what to do about it. And geez, this is a great book. For someone who loves words, I find nothing better than when I read a book and I hear someone put into words things that I've felt and sensed. And it's just like this moment. And when I read this book, it was so fantastic to hear Brian McLaren in this book talks about stages of faith and how our faith evolves. And it's a beautiful permission-giving space to recognise, oh yeah, that's right. Things have changed a little bit. Oh, I haven't lost my faith. I haven't given up on church, but it feels different now. And I am different now. And what does that look like? And he talks about the 4 stages being simplicity, into complexity, into perplexity, and then into harmony. And this space of harmony he describes as simply being faith expressing itself in love. Now that sounds very simple, but anyone who's tried to really embody that knows that when you get to a place where harmony, and that's actually what you're committed to, incredibly, incredibly freeing. And I just want you to read one quote that he threw from his book, because I think it sums up why I enjoyed it. He says, looking back at my own spiritual pilgrimage, I've come to see the still more excellent way of love as the telos whose gravitational pull has been drawing me first through simplicity, then through complexity, then downward through perplexity, and then deeper still towards an experience that is too profound for words, the experience of harmony. When I loved correctness in stage 1, yes, correctness mattered, but the love with which I pursued correctedness mattered still more. And when I loved effectiveness in stage 2, yes, effectiveness mattered, but the love that moved me to pursue it mattered still more. And when I loved honesty and justice in stage 3, yes, honesty and justice mattered, but the love that burned in my heart for them mattered still more. And there was great reflection and action at the end of each chapter. And it was the first book that I actually sat and did all the questions at the end of it. You know how often books have that? And I kind of go like, yeah, leave them. But that one I sat with a journal and I wrote and answered it. And I found it such a therapeutic kind of way of just really having some pictures and some words for the faith journey that I'd experienced. So it was a really beautiful one. And then finally, one last one. I did a take 7 in case you've noticed it wasn't take 5. It's this book called God Walk, Moving at the Speed of Your Soul. And again, I'll read you the quote at the beginning of the book because I think it sums up really what this book is about. God walks slowly because he is love. If he is not love, he would move much faster. Love has its speed. It is an inner speed. It's a spiritual speed. It is a different kind of speed from the technological speed to which we are accustomed. It is slow. And yet it is Lord over all other speeds, since it is the speed of love. It goes on in the depths of our life, whether we notice it or not. And this book reminded me and continually reminds me, I've read this about 3 times, and it's really, this essence is that walking as a practice, as a physical reality, could be a spiritual practice that actually reminds us of God's speed. And there's times where I start off on a walk and I literally say to myself, I'm walking to remind myself of God's speed. I'm walking to remind myself that this is the speed that my day needs to go. And I found that incredibly beautiful and incredibly life-giving. So that's my take 7 of some interesting books that have spoken to me and short little snippets of how they've spoken to me. And then before we head into communion, I just want to leave you with one final quote from T.S. Eliot. And it is one of my, I think it's possibly my favourite quote. And he says that we shall not cease from exploration. And at the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time through the unknown, remembered gate. I'll read it again for you. We shall not cease from exploration. And at the end of all our exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time through the unknown, remembered gate. And I love that picture of an unknown but remembered gate. And that's my hope for us as we enter into this 2025, that we're not too sure where it will take us. We don't quite know where the paths will lead. But I pray that we could keep chasing God's light, that we could keep chasing after who he is, and trust that as we can be more fully ourselves, that we can shine God's light even brighter and others might find him too.
Thank you so much for joining us. Each week at West City, we say a benediction together. We do this because we believe that the purpose of the church is to be a caring community for the world, and that as we go and serve others, we enter into Christ's work of welcome, restoration and healing, both for us and others. We believe that in doing so, we get to see and encounter Christ. So let's say the benediction together. We come together as the church to be reminded of the go of Christ. So we will go out and feed the hungry, go out and clothe the naked, go out and fight for justice, go out and end oppression, go out and proclaim anew the old story, go out and associate with those who don't look like us, think like us, act like us, and don't even like us. And we'll do it all in the name of the one who sent us. His name is Jesus.